to Nerds with Dice. Here today, we are raising money for the Trans Justice Funding Project. So, if you want to learn more, you can drop a TJFP in the chat. That'll give you all the information that you need, as well as a donation link. So, please do check it all out, as our marathon this weekend is in support of trans justice. So, please check it all out and enjoy. This hour, we're going to be doing a panel called Characters and How They Made Us, dedicated to the players and their characters that they have played through their sessions and used to discover themselves or empower themselves through play. I am Natalie. I am the moderator for this panel. My pronouns are she, they, and I am excited to present our table here. So let's go around, starting with Jellyfish. Your name and pronouns, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jellyfish Lines, and my pronouns are he, him. Sometimes I forget I have them.
Valid. All right, Jilly.
Am I unmuted? Let's
You're good.
find out. Okay. Sorry, I was changing slowly and it was not telling me. Hello, my name is Jilly. My pronouns are she, her.
All right, thank you. And Valiant.
Hello, everyone. My name is Valiant Dorian, and my pronouns are he, him. Back over to you.
Right. Thank you. And of course, our panels here aren't alone. They're coming in with characters that they wish to discuss that mean a lot to them. Either they've discovered certain aspects of themselves through them or use them as ways to channel those aspects that they want to explore further on. So let's go around again and please tell me a character you'd like to talk about today, starting with Jellyfish.
Hi, I'm talking about my most blurro of all time, Cashmere. Um, I I love this little man. His pronouns are he, him. I he's from the Alien franchise TTRPG. I love him so much. Mwah. I torture him so bad.
I mean, don't we all love to torture our own characters? Hey, thank you. And Jilly?
Hi. Again. So I will be talking about Mila, who is a character that I created. It was my first TTRPG character that I ever created for a game, and that game is still going. 8 almost 8 years later, I think we're at right now. And was for D&D 5e because that was my gateway into TTRPG. And well, we'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, she's a rogue, and she is the assassin rogue of archetypes. Like that was what she was originally created for, is the roguiest rogue to ever rogue.
Delightful and Valiant.
So the character I'll be like chatting about today is Ishmael, who uses he/they pronouns, and I played Ishmael in an Invisible Sun actual play. Around the first year I joined the AP space. So it is set in the setting and world of Monty Cook Games' Invisible Sun, and within the game of Invisible Sun, and his whole deal is he is this very very charming, extremely flamboyant and cunning charismatic summoner. There are different classes within Invisible Sun. His is specifically summoning entities, and his particular specialty is angels, and he considers himself to be a master of contracts. So that's his whole deal.
Ooh, that is very interesting. Well, I'm super excited to hear how these characters came about and what your journey has been with them. So, we did sort of talk about a couple of the beginnings. So, what I would love to know is how that beginning was when you built that character. Was there intentions to explore something? Was it you're just playing a game? And Jill, you look like you're ready to jump in, so I'll let you go.
I was mostly looking to see if my captions have revived themselves, which it seems like they have. I have 12 million tabs open right now, which is why. But yes, so the original, like, I didn't know how to create a D&D character or a TTRPG character in general. So I was like, oh, what am I good at? I'm going to be good at everything because obviously. So I fully like admit that this character was created to be like, oh yeah, just perfect and practically perfect in every way. But um I also wanted to play someone with a little bit of edge, and I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but I had been watching various like games online, and I was like, yeah, half elf rogue assassin. Like I'm gonna be like so quick and sarcastic and fun. Um and then kind of when I started to delve into it, and I set up like a whole secret backstory that the people in my campaign did not know about, the other players in my campaign did not know about for like 3 full real life years. Like they didn't know her real name, I want to say, for like almost 3 years in real life. Um and so it kind of ended up being this like, anyway, my intention was to create the perfect character for me to play and win at D&D was my intention. If that's the answer to your question. Feel free to stop me when I keep talking, because otherwise I will just,
No,
when we have characters we love, we're just like, let me tell you. Let me tell you all
exactly.
about it.
I mean, that's why we're here. We're here to talk about
Also,
them.
side note, I have played in a game with Ishmael, I believe.
Yes, you have. You have met Ishmael.
I've met Ishmael. Ishmael
Mm.
did
Yeah.
not like me, which was unfortunate, but it's fine.
He's a judgy bitch. Don't
It's
like,
fine. I was
he's
being a little annoying. You're valid.
he is petty and judgy.
Yeah.
So
Well,
Perfect.
then let's jump over then, Valley, and tell us more about this petty, judgy Ishmael. What was that start and what the intentions were going in?
I mean, so with this particular, when I joined the AP space in God summer of 2021, this was an AP I was casted in around fall of the time, and it was also kind of the first time I had been put into a an actual play that was in a longer format because it was a mini series, and it was with a system I was not very familiar with. So I was in a position where I was like, okay, I've played so far in my AP career at that point a lot of archetypes I'm comfortable with. The noble knights, the tank of the party, these sort of like very key like paladin-esque archetypes. And I was really wanting to challenge myself in playing someone a little different. And so Ishmael was my sort of like, okay, this is a character archetype that I'm very interested in because I love characters like Dorian Pavas from Dragon Age Inquisition, one of my favorite characters of all time. And I was like, oh, I would like to tap into that sort of like extremely charming, charismatic, maybe at points insufferable kind of characters, but they have a legitimate like power, gravitas, and point to them. And so Ishmael was kind of like a challenge to myself of like, okay, let's try and play this type of character, especially in a setting like Invisible Sun, where we're dealing with a lot of surrealism. There's a lot of sort of like fun factions and politicking, and even within the different classes, different ways of moving about the world. And that's how Ishmael came to like, that was the first initial challenge. And so when I was initially crafting him, a lot of the things I was tapping into was like, okay, I'm trying to build someone who is charismatic. So let me just begin build like using all the different aspects of character creation to bolster that. So for example, picking his class being that of Goetics, I was like, all right, I pick Goetic because that's the one class where most of the thing you're doing is talking.
Mm.
Your whole deal is negotiating with entities and hoping they will help you and not escape out of your summoning circle and make your life hell.
I do that all the
And
time.
I know, isn't that wild and cool? And so a lot of the things was like, okay, tapping into the idea of like, uh, this is where a bit of me started kind of like coming into the character, where I was like, okay, what sort of vibe of eloquence do I want to go into? And in my day job, I'm legally trained, I'm a lawyer. And I was
Mhm.
like, all right. And there's an aspect in this game's creation where you create who you are in Saturnine, which is the real world, and in the world of Shadow, which is our world, the modern world, which is an illusory world, you are living in a lie and you're brought back into Saturnine, which is the premise of Invisible Sun. So that's where I started putting little bits of myself of like, okay, you could be a lawyer in Shadow, and that's why you're kind of like, that's how your talent manifests and things like that. So that's kind of how Ishmael was born a little bit, was tapping into like my legal profession experience as well as a challenge to try and play somebody new.
Oh, very cool. We love challenging ourselves. All right. And Jellyfish, please talk about how the start of Cashmere was. What, when any intentions going in or anything surprising as you built them?
Cashmere started as a one-shot character that I approached my friend Javante about. Shout out to Javante, heart emoji. Um, to like be like the game mother for like the mini campaign that we had. It fizzled out, but like this man is autistic. This man is disabled. I love him so much. This man is me. Um, and going from the one shot to the main game was looking at okay, there is one paragraph on a single page in like a side box in the original Alien 1E text that mentions jailbroken androids. There are no rules for them. There are no stats. There is nothing. And I went like, why would you give me this? I'm going to run with this now. And I kind of looked at jailbreaking from a couple different perspectives. Jailbreaking as a form of PTSD, jailbreaking as a form of
Mm,
freedom, because like in the world of Alien, the androids are bound by essentially like the code of robotics, which is just like
mm,
it's actually tacked on afterwards in the canon. They can in fact hurt people if they go long enough without updates or if they are jailbroken. It's why if they're jailbroken, you gotta make them milk soup, which is quite literally what they bleed. They bleed like this green tinted white. Um, I love them so much. They're Blorbo of all time. Um, so I made him jailbroken, and I did that on purpose because I'm just like, yeah, like I'm disabled in a world that hates me, and in an ableist society, and it's just like how to navigate an ableist society that does not like you, and also like being an android not only as queerness but also as disability.
mm,
Mm. No, for sure. It is. It, tabletops can definitely give us a lot of these nuanced stories where if we're comfortable
mm,
enough to feel that we can explore these with the people at our table and be able to express ourselves through our characters, we're able to express joy or rage that we may be feeling through our own societies where we can't do much, but in our characters, we can fulfill a lot of that.
mm,
So, what I would like to ask then, coming off of that, is I suppose if there was anything through your sessions as you're playing your characters, getting to know these aspects about yourselves, was there anything that really stuck out in your mind that is now like, this character is far more me than maybe I initially ever intended?
So, um, I come from a theater background. I do theater and I teach acting. And so a lot of the stuff that happens in TTRPG improv wise and RP wise is stuff that I was fairly used to doing in other aspects of my life. So that wasn't a difficult transition. But I think that one of the biggest ways that um Mila specifically, but I think definitely other characters that I've played in general uh is the need to be seen as competent and smart and not an imposter in a situation, because imposter syndrome is real in many different aspects, and the fact of being seen as someone who has control of a situation, right, and is smart enough to understand what's going on is like a really difficult thing to deal with sometimes. And so I found kind of like myself struggling with that insecurity, and especially at times when I was struggling with it in my real life for whatever reason. And this is also like connecting to the idea of being queer because, like, for a very long time, I didn't publicly identify as bisexual because I was like, well, I'm not bisexual enough to call myself bisexual, right? Like, there's very much the idea of like imposing something on myself that I would
Mm,
never impose on anybody else, right? And it's like, of course, you could identify as that, and then I would hold myself to a different standard. But I think one of the things that Mila kind of taught me was the ability to kind of, I'm not going to say power through because that implies like a disregard for those
Mhm.
situations, but to persevere through those situations because there is something rewarding about continuing in the face of insecurity that uh that you don't get as someone who kind of backs away from situations because you don't feel that you deserve them.
mm,
um Yeah, I think that's it. That, and I also found a quote. It's attributed to Meryl Streep. Here's the thing. I don't think that Meryl Streep actually said this, but I've had the quote written down for a long time, and the internet tells me that Meryl Streep said it. I don't know that I believe that, but it was acting is not about being someone different. It's finding the similarity in what is apparently different than finding myself in there. um, which is something that I've used a lot as an actor and an acting teacher to
mm,
kind of explain the way that I approach playing a character. And I think sometimes you have to hook into those things that are similar, but it can also
Mhm.
bring up a lot of painful stuff.
mhm.
Especially when your character is going through something. I know we'll talk about character bleed probably a little bit later, but like dealing with that insecurity in character can very much become a reflecting back on itself situation. Um,
Yeah. No, for sure. Thank you. Yes. Insecurities and exploring those through character can be very cathartic, but as you said, the bleed can come through, and we will talk about
Mm.
that in a bit. So Valiant.
uh Ish, when you the second you asked that question, I was like, ah, I'm about to put myself on blast here. Um, when I made Ishmael, it was meant to be a challenge of playing somebody that I wasn't necessarily like archetypally someone that I would tend to play. And with creating Ishmael and embodying Ishmael, a huge thing that I realized that we share is that one, it was a thing that I discovered about his character, and that is, my God, does Ishmael care deeply about everything to a very, very intense degree that they are like intensely loving, intensely judgmental, intensely hateful. They do not necessarily do things in half measures. um and through like exploring a lot of that and realizing, oh, this cunning create like character that I've built to be someone who like weaves their words very, very carefully, someone who like cares about their appearance into a great degree, made me realize i i I care very, very deeply about everything. A lot of these like incredible moments that we have in Soul's Confidant, where Ishmael feels very, very intensely about things, when I'm performing as him, come from a very, very real place where I felt either an intense judgment or an intense love or an intense uh, drive to want to succeed or do something. Um, I realized that in that moment, that Ishmael and I are far more connected. In fact, so much so that I got a tattoo inspired by Ishmael. These are the two snakes that snake tattoos that weave around his body and indicate a lot of his feelings and emotions, which is another thing that I also discovered about him, is that a lot of this sort of like bravado and a lot of this sort of face that he puts on is a mask, a facade for things, a type of masking, which I felt intensely relatable as the longer I played him. Of, oh wow, you are a type of neurodivergent, Ishmael, Ishmael Kadir. Like you, and that was something deeply relatable to me, and something I realized was something that I was doing, was navigating the world in phrasing my words a certain way, or speaking in a certain way, or carrying myself in a certain way, so that folks do not see me as quote unquote too sensitive or
Mm.
quote unquote too intense. And that is a thing that, through playing Ishmael, held up a mirror of my own sort of like neurodivergency and feelings about said neurodivergency right back in my face. There are other things he made me discover, but I'm sure we'll talk
Mhm.
about that shortly.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting concept when you start off with the purpose of making a complete opposite character, and then you realize where it was once supposed to be almost a mask now becomes a complete reflection of those parts of you. You're like, oh, I didn't realize they were there at all. So jellyfish for Kashmir, what was that journey like, and what did you discover about yourself through them?
A couple different things for that journey is that Kashmir is also deeply neurodivergent in a way that is like angry. Because Kashmir, despite being a jailbroken android, does not pretend he's a regular android. He pretends he's a person. Um, in a way that is like, I just want to live. I just want to live. I just want to live. And one of the things that he does to in like the fiction of like this world was that he used to take like red dye pills, and those red dye pills would dye his like inner liquids like red to look like blood, including his tears. So even if he did open up and he did cry, it would be immediately found out.
Mm.
And part of that is looking at like vulnerability at being disabled, because there is a lot of vulnerability involved in being disabled in this world, that the world does not like us. I mean, America had ugly laws back until like the 70s, 80s, even. And, you know, I just, I look at disability from a couple of different ways as a disabled person. One, I would be probably a little bit more functional if it was like the 1400s and I was herding sheep, because there wouldn't be noise everywhere. It would just be sheep. Uh, Also, I like modern medicine. I like not dying. Um, and it's also just like looking at disability within the context of the environment, but also looking at disability of I would still be disabled. I'd just be like the guy who herds the sheep really well. I would be the guy that's like, yeah, we don't know like why they're like that, but you know what? They make really great art. They tell really good stories. And that's like part of that is just looking at like disability within the context of the environment. And with Kashmir within the like world of like the Alien franchise, disability is still a thing. There is no fixing it because we don't need it. But at the same point in time, what Kashmir is a threat to the status quo of Wayland Yutani, the biggest corporation on this side of the galaxy. Every secret that they have, he can potentially gain access to and not be tracked about it. And it's just looking at that, where it's like you can see the bullshit that society has for you, the contempt it has for you, and you can speak it out loud, but who will believe you?
Mhm.
And I hope to get to a day where we can be believed.
Mhm. No, that is definitely a massive goal that we so much desperately need to achieve. Um, yeah, it's very good.
Sorry, I got really serious in here. I'm sorry.
No, it is okay because you know
Don't
what?
apologize.
Yeah, never apologize, especially when it comes to our passions and things we care about. Because even while we're processing, it's important to acknowledge those feelings, and especially in terms of how our characters help us with those, what we're discovering through those. Having done some sociology classes myself,
Mm.
you can get so angry when you realize just how much injustice there is when you start seeing it, and then you start trying to play it out through a game. You're like, yeah, our real world really, really sucks, and I need some sort of outlet to help me express this. And with all those emotions, it can bring out a lot of bleed, as we have sort of touched on here, and how much that can stick with us and linger. Um, so for our players now is when you enter those moments of bleed, when they start coming up, you get those heightened emotions. Um, is there anything that you found whether worked or maybe something that didn't work? Because that's important to know too on what has helped you get out of that bleed. And just for the audience who may have, this could be the first time to hear it, character bleed is, well, when we essentially get into the headspace of our characters so much, it becomes harder to pull who is the player and who is the character because we feel so strongly at the same time. That's just sort of my general wording. Some people may express a difference in their interpretation, but um, for our panelists, if you like to jump in and express how that goes for you.
Jordan, if you want to go first, go ahead.
I was saying you should go ahead.
Okay. So, hot take here. I'm schizoaffective. Sometimes I want bleed to happen.
Mhm.
Sometimes I play for it. Um, and being schizoaffective is, if I'm not right in my brain, I can lose contact with reality in that sense.
Mhm.
And it's just looking at that aspect of losing contact with reality in a controlled environment where it is safer than doing it on not my own terms.
Mhm.
And I think that is something that like people don't understand a lot in this space, is that there are people that play for it and there are people that play for it who are mentally ill that need that.
Mm.
Because as somebody who is extremely mentally ill and even medicated, I still need that every once in a while.
Can I ask a follow-up question if I
Yes.
may?
Go ahead.
Is there like a is there a point at which you are able to recognize this is helpful for me and then cross into like a place where okay, this has stopped being helpful for me and I need to step out of it, or is this something that you just kind of ride through? um
It's something that I just kind of ride through, and it's just something where it's like I come out of it after like there's a session end, and like whenever I try to do stars and wishes, I don't try to refer to character names, I refer to them by people. It's a separation of a person from character, and that's what I try to do as much as I can. um but yeah, it's like looking at being schizoaffective on schizophrenia spectrum and having delusions, having hallucinations, having paranoid thoughts, having like positive and negative symptoms. And not in that way, positive means additive, negative means take it away. Um, it's looking at that from that perspective of what is a positive symptom in a controlled environment. And I don't think that's really been an aspect that's been explored in some studies of play within TTRPGs. And I really wish there was more studies on that.
That's interesting because it sort of connects to my response to this question in that I am someone, so I'm training currently to be an intimacy professional for film and TV, and I found there's a lot of crossover in the TTRPG safety conversation with that training. And what you were saying, Jellyfish, about creating a safe space for that to occur and making sure your table is a place that those kind of experiences are able to happen without danger. And part of one of the things that I think is a huge crossover in that is communication with the rest of the table on what you need and what you are able to do versus what is harmful for you or impossible for you. Um, and I found like in my longest running group, we've had several of those conversations often, like not often, but when we get to a point where it's like, okay, I've had something that's come up and I need to kind of voice this out loud. There have been times when I've talked to a DM and I've said, "Hey, it kind of feels like the story is going in this direction and I need to kind of establish some boundaries around, where this is going to potentially go." For yeah, and there have also been times where, like, because I struggle with anxiety, and I've kind of said, okay, I understand that we need a cliffhanger, I totally get it, but like, can we frame it in this way instead of this way so that I don't spend the next week hyper focusing on whether
Mhm.
this is going to happen or not. So I think setting up a framework at your table for having those conversations is so important, so that when you or another player gets to a point where they're like, this is the experience I need, this is what the support that I need for my mental health, um I I have the whole table consenting and, understanding that experience, um so
I
that
wish I was that brave.
well, and that this is the thing, is like, there's not really in a lot of cases an established way to bring, like, there's no
Mhm.
guideline in a lot of ways for those conversations, and
Mhm.
people are kind of very often flying blind when they have those conversations because
Mhm.
they have to kind of create the framework for it. And I'm not saying that I have found the magic answer to this, or that I have always been successful, right? um
Mhm.
it's a thing that I think can be talked about more in TTRPG spaces, especially as part of the safety conversation, is, you know, it is important. I'm fortunate the most, if not all, of the tables I've been at had people who are very understanding and very appreciative of that communication. But, it's a big world and there's a lot of tables out there, and not every table is going to suit those
Mhm.
conversations. I will get on a whole thing about consent in TTRPGs, so I need to, like, veer back. But Jellyfish,
It's the
please.
weight. It's the weight of the heart or the feather. On
Mm,
one hand, there's trusting your table enough and understanding that, hey, maybe they're actually kind. On the other hand, it is, what is their stereotype of schizophrenia?
Mhm.
mm,
It's dealing with like the weight and the stigma of that
mm,
more than this. And it's kind of, you're rocking a hard place basically.
mm,
And it's like trying to figure out, how does the space see schizophrenic individuals and people who are schizophrenic? And the answer is, I don't know yet, because
mhm,
I'm, as far as I know, I'm one of the only, if not one of the few people that is open about this, very open about this, as much as I can be.
mhm. In terms of character bleed and the way that I particularly navigate it in this ongoing conversation, I echoing like sentiments that already been said. I don't see character bleed as an if rather than a when, because in terms when we're thinking about theater performance and acting in particular, right? There is always going to be a little piece of yourself that does end up in the character. It doesn't necessarily have to be a particularly intimate piece, but it does happen, right? There is going to be a time where you're going to be very invested in the story. There's going to be a time where you might feel that what had occurred was unfair to your character within the scenario, or what happened to your character felt good in the scenario. That is also a type of character bleed. We often talk about bleed within a negative like context, but like what bleed is in terms of its definition is when the state of mind, the character, and you are within within each other's own field. That is what it means, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean a negative connotation or a negative emotion. And even if it does, a lot of actors and a lot of performers, like Jellyfish has already mentioned, have used it as a technique. It is a type of technique that can be used and utilized. I, in fact, use it in a lot of my performances in different characters in order to bring out an authentic, very, very real performance. And to me, a lot of like bleed and navigating bleed comes back down to important like safety strategies. It always comes back down to that. It comes down to this idea of, on like, number one, a knowledge of self, which not necessarily everyone, like, acknowledging also that not everyone will know that certain things are where bleed is happening. That usually sometimes happens after the fact, right? Oh, this is a thing that feels more personal, feels more real to me in this moment. But there's also like that's a huge, like, primary strategy is to understand, what is this feeling, this is what it is, and I can name it, or I can at least identify it or know how it feels within my body. And then subsequently being able to create an environment within and around the table, both on and off camera, on and off the table, where there can be like a very, very clear communication of when these things can and do happen. Which is why, when we talk about safety within the tabletop space, I'm less inclined to talk about safety in an if scenario, because we always talk about if something happens
Mhm.
rather than a when. And I feel that folks feel far more equipped to deal with safety issues when we are all equipped, when we actually are able to practice. It's a skill like any other. This is like, I remember, this is a conversation we've had as part of Transplanar, consistently, where we realize, hey, actually, when have we seen someone pull a red card? When have we seen someone hit an X?
Mhm.
Right? When have we seen folks do an above table check in during an intense scene with another character? And by being able to, like, just model that, it like, lower stakes has made it easier in order to model that in higher stakes scenarios. And that's what I've tried to do with, like, character bleed. Is Let's say, for example, I'm in the DM scheming with my GM, right? We got a big moment, like, and which for Ishmael we had several moments of scheming. There was, in fact, one, spoilers for the Soul's Confidant. There's a huge conversation that we had about Ishmael being dead and getting killed during the final combat, and that being something that I was like, he's fine now.
Mhm.
But that was a real conversation to have, of like that moment, and how that would impact the other players. And we had all these very, very real conversations, and being able to, like, outline and communicate that, hey, this is how like what Jilly said, right? Like, this is how these boundaries look like. This is how this is what I'm going for. So instead of framing a lot of these conversations as, uh-oh, like, the boundaries scary, capital B boundaries, uh-oh,
Mhm.
being able to reframe it as, this is how I have fun the best,
Mhm.
right? This is how I as a player perceive certain things. So with Ishmael, I was able to communicate that, like, hey, friend, if you want to, like, launch me out in a like an incredibly dramatic way, I am a-okay. Like, I'm okay with you taking the wheel there and not having, like, necessary narrative control, because, like, I want, what I'm looking for in this moment is that, like, sweeping death, for example, right? Like, being able to actually communicate that, I think, is deeply, deeply important. And as we continue to talk about, like, character bleed and how to navigate that, it's important that we're all extremely gentle with ourselves
Mhm.
and with each other, because it is a high likelihood that we are all navigating this particular conversation in a new way and a new facet each time. So be
Mhm.
kind to yourselves, y'all, please. Yeah. So that's my long-winded answer to say I agree with my other two panelists.
Beautiful answers. And yeah, there's definitely, and something I've been seeing slowly from the first time I've entered specifically AP spaces is the changes and bringing in more nuance to just, I initially started with lines and veils, and a lot of times that felt very hard, like,
Mm,
do not touch this or blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, I'm okay if someone wants to explore this, but not myself. And other
mm-hmm,
aspects, or like, I can
Mhm.
handle this in certain scenarios, or I really want to explore this specifically. And
mm-hmm,
I am starting to see these more patterns of tweaked tools, whether or new interpretations of the lines and veils, new frameworks. What was
Mm.
one that the palette one for addressing like how
Shout
you
out to
want
J
to.
Dragon.
Yeah, shout out to
Mhm.
J Dragon on the palette or stuff addressing like where and sort of the areas that certain topics would be, roses and thorns. There's so many tools we can help. There's no perfect tool out there. There never is. Our
Mhm.
best tool is communication and conversation, because understanding the people at your table, getting to know them,
Mm.
and understanding where each player wants to take their character and understanding how the player wants to express themselves
Mhm.
with their character.
So,
So,
Mhm.
so to start to slowly wrap up our wonderful panel, I feel we can talk and keep talking, especially as we get into, again, the nuance of all
Mhm.
this, because it can get so in
Mhm.
depth. I would like to know something something delightful that you discovered about yourself through your character, something happy. It could be you discovered a hobby that you liked, maybe researching your character brought about a new book or a new passion, something
Mhm.
a little interesting.
I have an immediate answer to this with Ishmael. Ishmael, so as a trans man, masculinity and the trappings of it and the like various facets of it is something that I'm constantly exploring and constantly wrangling with. And for a long time, and I think a lot of like trans masks can understand this particular feeling, there is this sort of like idealized or a specific perspective on how we should be engaging with or performing masculinity. And I'm like not gonna lie, before I was able to kind of like access a lot of treatments and like HRT or top surgery, like I felt that way. I had significant dysphoria before I got top surgery and all of these things. And when playing Ishmael, like I said, it was meant to play a character who is a distinct challenge for me, someone who I would not necessarily navigate towards in terms of playing. And in Ishmael's sort of like flamboyance and charm and like honey soaked words and the way that he like navigates the world, I found myself kind of like not necessarily sticking to a lot of the ideas of masculinity in the way that I performed him. It was also the first time I had ever like allowed myself the permission to experiment with makeup and using that in actual play. I started with Kajal, and then because I did that with Ishmael and like accessorizing with like extremely flamboyant and like delicate like jewelry and clothing and things like that, being able to be extremely playful with my masculinity, being really playful with femininity, that was a beautiful thing that Ishmael gave me, was that permission to be able to exist in the beautiful flux of gender. And it's because of Ishmael that I was able to be like, yeah, if masculinity is a horse in terms of gender, then for me, I am a pony. That's where I align in terms of like my gender, right? Like this is how it feels and manifests. And because of Ishmael and that beautiful exploration, I believe, and like in the immediate aftermath of that, I got to GM a charity game where I played a Madam Matchmaker. And I like actually experimented with like tying a sari and wearing a nose earring with beads that go past my ears, and being able to play with a lot of like fun femininity with that. And it's
Mm,
because I was able to discover that through playing Ishmael,
Mhm.
and I highly recommend more like folks, like especially like masculine, like aligned folks, whether you're trans masc or not, to allow yourself that permission to be playful with your gender and not put yourself into this tight little box of how gender should be, because you might find that you represent or are part of a different facet of it, and that's yours and your own particular experience, and it's beautiful.
I love it. I love it so much. Great. Uh, Jilly?
Okay. I'm sort of filing through because I had like four different things I was gonna say, and then I was like, I need to pick.
Mm.
So I think I kind of touched on already the idea of like of society imposing on us what queerness is, right? And from all directions, right? From even within the queer community, sometimes the idea that like, well, you can't be queer unless you check these specific boxes of the, the form that you have to fill out. And I think that one of the things that Mila gave me was the confidence to know that if I am private about things, it does not mean that I don't deserve to be part of those communities. Um, and, even the confidence to not be private in certain moments about those things. Um, and the confidence to speak up more in the face of people or things that are actively being unempathetic towards those groups. Um, and part of it is, like you get to fight the dragon, and sometimes the dragon is homophobia. And that's, that's really cool and awesome. But it's also partly kind of being comfortable being a part of certain communities yourself
Mm.
and not having to give yourself some kind of purity test to, you know, be entitled to give yourself whatever labels that you want. Um, and I think that that is something that playing I mean, maybe it is to an extent because she has a lot of knives and not a lot of people are going to question her over
Mhm.
much. Um, but also there's the knives, which I now look at very often on the internet. That is another thing that she has given me. Looking
Mm.
at pretty dresses, gowns, and knives on the internet. Um, but I think the you know, inside you are two wolves.
Yeah.
Um, and they're knife Pinterest and gown Pinterest. Um, but the idea that I can give myself the labels that work for me when they work for me, and I can have them just for myself if I want, and I don't have to share them necessarily. Um, that was kind of big for me in terms of the imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
and anxiety over belonging in a community. And that is something that I think that Mila has made me a lot more comfortable with.
Awesome. Okay, jellyfish.
One big thing that Cashmere made me really comfortable with, it's going to take me a second to get there.
Mhm.
This is where my voice actually naturally sits, and I don't know why. I don't know how. Also, I'm incredibly sick, so it's not as clear. Um, this is where my voice naturally sits, and this is around the vocal range of Kashmir. Um,
And this is where my voice actually sits because I live in Ohio. Um, so it Kashmir made me much more comfortable about my vocal range because it was
Mm.
something that I actually get away with online
Mm.
and actually get the practice with to actually, not be in like physical pain over my vocal
Mhm.
cords being weird on testosterone.
Oh, that was really cool. I can't get that deep. I wish I could. I really wish I could.
uh, I saw the TV glow. There's still time.
Hey, well, thank you, my darling panelists. It was so wonderful to hear about your characters and yourselves and all the experiences you've had in sharing those personal things about yourselves and them. So we're going to do quick outros as we are going to move on to our next game very, very quickly. So let's go just as we did before with the intro, starting with Jellyfish. Name, who
Hi.
you are, and where we can find you.
Hi, my name's Jellyfish Lines. My pronouns are he, him. You can find me on Blue Sky and at itch.io, at jellyfishlines.itch.io. Please vote for me in the Crit Awards. Also vote for Val in the Crit Awards. I'm up for Best Solo Game. Mwah. Thank you. I love you.
Right. Thank you, Jellyfish and Jilly.
Hi, I'm Jilly. You can find me at Oh Look It's Jilly most places on the internet. I am not nominated for any Crit Awards, but I will be here most of tomorrow. So you can find me at 2 a.m. Pacific time here running a game of Bewitched, which I'm titling Bywitched, which is by witches solving a unicorn kidnapping. I will also then be here on Sunday for a D&D game in which I am playing a sage wizard named Ivy. I don't know much about that game yet, but it's going to be very fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Jilly and Valiant.
Hi everyone, my name is Valiant Dorian. I use him, his pronouns. You can find me all across the internet at Valiant Dorian or at Otso Spirit Bear. Please enjoy that lovely treasure hunt to set you on. And in terms of stuff that you can see me on, I'm a Twitch variety streamer, TTRPG AP performer. You can find me over at Transparent RPG where I play Sayer, the misbeloved twin brother of the Chosen One. And you can also, as Jellyfish has mentioned, one of my games has been nominated for a Crit Award. It's called Self Assurance. It's about a guileless challenger challenging a cunning asura for boons. So please consider voting for it. And there's also so many really, really cool folks who have been nominated for Crit Awards this year. Please go take a look, read through all the nominations and all the candidates, and vote and support your favorite creators. I appreciate all the work
Vote
that
for
you've
cool people.
gone through. Please go vote for cool people. Absolutely. And yeah, and if you've enjoyed my work, go ahead and follow me on my socials because there's a bunch of stuff. Oh, how could I forget? On Tuesdays, you can find me over on the Wounded Warrior Project where I play Randir Vilfor, who is if you liked the cunning, charming vibe of Ishmael, you will like Randir because I made him because I miss Ishmael too much. So please go
So
ahead and check it
exciting.
out.
Before Natalie goes, can I also add you can also find me on Valdriant's channel tomorrow playing Kids on Bikes. We've had a couple of weeks off. I'm a twin. The soda has people in it, maybe. We're working on it. It's a crime. Anyway.
All right.
Well,
Thank you.
over to you, Natalie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me to finish off. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Natalie, she, they. Find me most places on the internet with Ghost Candle or Ghostly Candle on Twitch and YouTube. I am an artist, actual play performer, and just general variety person. So follow me if you like that. I will be here on Sunday with our Oops All Aces Thirsty Lesbians game. So make sure you come check it out and see how our Ace Arrow folk deal with that. It's going to be a good time. And of course, reminder to hang out as we are raising funds for the Trans Justice Funding Project. Good cause. Drop TJFP in chat if you need any more information. And just enjoy our marathon. Coming up next, we'll be playing Running Out of Time, an inevitable one shot. So I hope you enjoy your next few hours in that game and please stick around. And thank you for joining. Bye.